Welcome to another Epiphany Craft Studio video. Today we are going to try something a little new for me anyway. As I'm sure if you've watched any sort of acrylic pouring videos, you've seen the puddle pour. And the puddle pour then gets blown and it turns into flowers. Well, I wanted to try something a little different because it is getting into the fall season. Instead of blowing a flower or the abstract representation of a flower, we're going to try doing leaves, and that's going to be a little more controlled, even though acrylic pouring you really have no control. But what can I say, I had high hopes. So I'm going to do a wet background, which is essential for blowing out puddles. And I'm using a white tan colored and a metallic shell from Rustoleum. I'd give you a whole listing of the paints, but I use so many I don't even remember what I used. Trying to do a marbled background. First attempt at this as well, and you'll see I'll fight with it for a little bit, trying to get it to look halfway decent. Now that I've gotten the canvas covered, I'm not quite happy with the quote-unquote marbling. So it's going to be a matter of adding some more white, try and lighten up the background a little bit so it's not quite as brown or off-white. And again, all trial and error, first time doing it. And as you can see, hands are paint covered at this point, so if you have problems with having paint all over your hands and you don't mind wearing gloves, definitely something you should do. I don't care as long as I don't have to touch anything else if my hands are covered in paint, but even this gets to be a bit much. And I'm okay with how the background looks at this point. I've gone, washed my hands. Makes for a happy painter. Alright, and here we go. First leaf in the wind attempt here.
I'm a leaf on the wind. Watch out.
And as you can see, I do have a lot of different paints. Some of it is Artist Loft, some of it is Cheap Joe's. Some of it is house paint, Behr house paint, and yes, if you don't already know, you can use house paint. It's acrylic, it works just as well, and when you can find it on sale, you can get it very cheap. Just get a sample of whatever color makes you happy and go for it. And now trying to blow the paint into some semblance of a leaf, without it going all the way down to the white of the background or going under the white of the background, and still get something that, oh yeah, if I squint and cross my eyes, that looks like a leaf. So get out the trusty bamboo stick here and going to try and get a little definition into the leaf. You may notice that the leaf goes over the edge of the canvas. That was actually intentional. I don't like it when people are so afraid to let whatever it is they're making stop right at the edge of the canvas. To me, it looks a little more, I don't know if natural's the right word, but we'll go with that. So I figured I'd let the green sit there for a few and think about what it's done and what I wanted it to do, and hoping that it would cooperate once it had time to dry a little bit. So I decided to get a little more daring and get out of the green palette and get more of a fall leaf color going. And your good old trusty straw, you will get lightheaded doing this. And just on a side note, If you're female and big busted, watch what you're doing because you will end up with bits of your anatomy in your paint. Just a side note. Now, because I'm not blowing the paint as hard as I possibly could, it's allowing the red to stay on top of the yellow, which is staying on top of the background. And it's giving me a little more say in how stuff looks. I mean, granted, you're still stuck with the shape of the air coming out of the straw. It's going to be the same. It's just the amount of force behind it. So you can only do so much. And again with the stick, trying to get it into a less whimsical leaf shape. And in this shot you can see the green and the different shades of green. Tell where I've used the stick on it trying to get some definition. And you'll see in a little bit I'll go back to it and work on it again. And when you're using the stick to kind of drag in paint and get some definition or lines, unless you're wanting to mix all your paint, wipe the end of the stick off. Every time you pull it out of the paint before you stick it back in, again, unless you're trying to blend colors or you don't care, wipe off the end of the stick. Now I'm using green and yellow, which if you've tried acrylic pouring and you got a little slap happy with your paint, green and yellow usually make a really nice shade of brown, especially when you don't want it to make a really nice shade of brown. So when you're doing something like this, because I'm not blowing that paint as hard as I possibly can, that green is sitting right on top of that yellow. It's not even really mixing. It's giving some contrast to the yellow. It's giving definition to the yellow, but it's not giving you baby poop brown. It's not really giving you a great leaf shape, but it's not giving you baby poop brown. And I know we're kind of far away from the leaves, and yes, I'm not quite done messing with them. But if you can hang around to the end of the video, we'll have close-up pictures of the leaves, dry. They haven't been polyed or anything yet, but you'll at least get an idea of how the paint dried, how the stick work turned out, and how much of the paint kind of drifted, which I don't think it really did. They stayed right where they ended up, which is shocking. So here I am back at that green leaf, trying to get it to look like more than just a blown out puddle of green. And now that the paint has had a chance to sit and start to dry just ever so slightly, you can get a little bit more traction with the stick and get it to do a little bit more of what you want. You're still limited because it's paint. It does what it wants. And just so you know, no dimethicone, silicone was used. Wouldn't have done much of anything anyway because I'm not moving the paint that much. So really didn't want cells. Although in hindsight, cells probably would have looked kind of cool if I could have gotten the paint to move enough for them to form. And again, wonderful color combination here of green and orange that would make another lovely shade of brown. But don't really have to worry about it in this context because it's not violent movement of the paint to make it mix. Pages missing. Were you ever mine? Once upon a time when our hearts were intertwined. I don't need you and I. When you leave, I'm a disaster. In the end, you'll be fine. I could be your ever after, but you are mine. In the end, will the hero save the world? Is it too late? I've denied the foreshadow at our feet. Is this our fate? I could let you go a long time ago, but my love will never die. I don't need you and I. When you leave, I'm a disaster. In the end, you'll be fine. I could be your ever after, but you were mine. But you were the light, but I was the sun. I can't find a purpose when you're gone. See eternal night, but maybe you're right. I don't need you and I. When you leave, I'm a disaster. In the end, you'll be fine. I could be. Now you may be thinking, Carrie, why didn't you stop with 4 leaves? You must have been tired of blowing that paint, monkeying with that stick. Just leave well enough alone. Here's a little bit of art theory for you. The human brain does not like paintings, pictures, drawings with even number objects in it. It tries to find the similarities, it tries to make pairs, and when you're doing things that are abstract in nature, which I don't think I've ever seen any of these leaves on this planet, you don't want whoever's looking at this to sit there and try and make matches and pairs and find things that are similar. You want the brain to be a little happier and have an odd number, which you would think we have 2 arms, 2 hands, 2 legs, 2 feet. Why wouldn't we be happier with even number? Can't answer that question, but if you go to an art gallery, even your most famous of famous artists, if they are doing anything that's flowers or buildings or windows on a building, doors, anything that can make something look symmetrical, unless that's what they're going for, they will have an odd number. This one, I got a little daring. I figured, let's try 3 colors all to go. And I think it turned out pretty well. I like the way the red got onto the tips of the leaf edges. If I would have stopped there, that would probably be the closest thing to an actual leaf. But why leave a good thing alone? Pick at it, play with it, make it worse. Why not? It's yours. Do what you want with it. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're sitting here, whether you're doing blown flowers, if you want to try your hand at leaves, paint only stays fluid for so long. And yes, when it starts to set, you have a little bit more playtime with it. You can get it to kind of stay where you're pushing it to a certain extent. If it gets past that prime point, then you're digging at paint that's too dry and you're gonna make a mess. So if you feel like, okay, I just tried moving or drawing a line in the paint and it didn't quite, just stop. Put stick down, walk away. I was sitting there looking at this and I had an epiphany. See what I did there? I wanted to use some of the brown that I had sat there and stirred. So I found a syringe. Now, syringe tips, the needles, whatever you want to call it. I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV. Has different gauges, meaning the hole is small, smaller, itty bitty, teeny tiny. So depending on how much paint you want to come out, try and find a gauge of needle that works best for you. So thought, well, let's see if we can't get some brown in here and do the veins of the leaves. Good concept. Didn't quite work the way I wanted it to, but it's passable. I think if the paint would have been maybe a little thinner, it would have come out a little more evenly from the syringe. As it was, it kind of came out in dribs and drabs, and I ended up having to go back in with the trusty old stick and try and get a nice solid line. And I didn't want to overdo it, so didn't get too fancy with the veins of the leaves. Just something to, oh yeah, okay, I see what she was trying to do. It's supposed to be a leaf. And all of the paint is just paint, water, and Floetrol. Again, can't give you specific measurements because it depends on the type of paint, temperature, humidity. So anybody who says, oh, this is what you always use, don't listen to them because that's just setting you up for failure. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video and maybe learned something. Maybe you want to try leaves. If you do, share a pic. Let's see how yours turned out. I'm sure this is something I'll try again in the future when I forget just how lightheaded I got blowing all that paint around. And if you were able to stay through all that just mind-boggling leaf work there, I did promise and mention that I would give you some close-up shots of how the leaves look dry. And without further ado, here you go.
As the world crashes down, let it burn to the ground. You say there's nothing worth saving right now. I believe that you love me, but I don't feel butterfly. Your heart was hiding from mine with no disguise. I know
my name's Lucy. Please give my mommy a thumbs up. If you do, I'll give you kisses. Go ahead, do it. There you go.